Listen close. This is the sound of a life that won the world and then watched the world take everything back. Slowly, deliberately, like a thief in a quiet room. This is John Travolta. Not the poster in your high school bedroom. Not the laugh on a late-night show. The man who left home with one suitcase, $150, a hunger that burned brighter than the lights that later swallowed him whole. He walked away from a house where 6 kids share one TV. He walked away with $150 and a suit of stubbornness. Who does that? A kid who believed the future owed him nothing, so he stole it anyway. Picture Englewood, New Jersey. A kitchen where the fridge groaned like an old engine. Father's hands stained in grease. A mother who once dreamed of stages, but gave those dreams to her children instead. Young John learned early that attention was currency, and survival was a performance. He sang and danced in the living room because it bought him a smile, a moment of warmth. At 16, he left school. At 16, he left certainty. At 16, he learned the cruel arithmetic of a dream. You have to lose everything to start winning. New York chewed him up. He slept on couches, ate hot dogs, and took parts that gave him 47 seconds on screen and $75 in cash. Then came Welcome Back, Kotter, and the whole world decided they wanted Vinnie Barbarino on their lunchbox. Overnight, the kid with the grease on his fingernails became a poster on a teenage wall. Money followed. Fame followed. But with fame came a new prison. People fell in love with the mask, not the man. Fame is a trickster. It claps you into a cage and applauds the bars. Then, Saturday Night Fever. He danced like a man trying to forget a life that had hurt him. He rehearsed until his legs shook. When the camera rolled, his body told the story no interview could. Hunger, loss, fight. The world named him their image of cool. And for a moment, at 23, John consumed the stars. The sane hands that clapped for him would later write his obituary in a morning paper. That is the cruelty of bright lights. Grease made him immortal. Posters, records, teenage screams. His face hung everywhere. But Hollywood is a sneaky beast. It loves you until it doesn't. They boxed him in with leather jackets and smirks. He tried to break out. He strained. He reached. And Hollywood shoved the old label back on. Then came the fall. Critics chewed up staying alive. He made choices that later felt like choices made in panic, in a hurry to stay relevant. He turned down roles that became legendary for others. He was human, vulnerable to bad bets, to ego, to the same mistakes every fallen star knows too well. Nobody remembers how quietly greatness can be ground into dust until it happens to someone you once loved. But then Tarantino came and pulled him up by the collar. Pulp Fiction, a 6-minute standing ovation that sounded like thunderclaps. The world remembered him again, not as a relic, but as a force. Suddenly, he was back in the center of the stage, a phoenix with old scars that shone like medals. He wasn't just saved by talent. He was saved by someone who remembered what he was made of. Now listen, all of that is public. The bright lights, the awards, the late-night jokes. Diana Hyland, his first great love, died in his arms at 23. His mother, Helen, the woman who handed him his first script, died of the same merciless disease, while his posters still covered teenage walls. Decades later, Kelly Preston, the woman who rebuilt him, who became the heartbeat of his family, was stolen by breast cancer at 57. Olivia Newton-John, a sister in spirit from Greece, taken after a long fight. Kirstie Alley, his friend and comrade, gone. Jett, his 16-year-old son, seized in a morning that turned paradise into a courtroom when extortion followed their grief. Sam, his brother, gone suddenly. 5 beloved women, a son, a brother. Names carved out of his life. You want scandal? Tabloids yelled. Lawsuits appeared and were withdrawn. Rumors circled his faith, his private life, the things gossip seeks to make monsters out of. But gossip is thin paper compared to the weight of real grief. The true scandal here is fate's cruelty. Cancer, in various masks, kept coming back into his circle like an enemy who learned his schedule. There's a certain grotesque poetry in losing so many people to the same thing. It makes you ask, is life a random storm or some deliberate curve of fate? And still, he kept walking. He flew planes because the sky judges less harshly than the street below. He bought runways and built a sanctuary with hangars and jets named after his children. He gave quietly. The John Travolta Foundation, gifts to pediatric research, to schools. He turned his grief into fuel for other people. He performed the hardest act of all. He loved again. He built a home. He fathered children. And when the cruelest blow came in 2020, when Kelly was stolen, he kept breathing anyway. You think a man who buried his first great love, his mother, his son, his wife, you think he stops? No, he keeps on. That is stubbornness. That is devotion. Imagine stepping out on a red carpet and feeling the weight of absent hands where a wolf's hand used to be. Imagine trying to tuck your daughter into bed when your chest feels like a basement full of broken radios. That is the private cinema of his nights. He does not perform there. He survives. Here's the blunt truth people avoid. John Travolta made mistakes. He invested in bombs. He aligned with controversial beliefs. He was mocked and pilloried. But you don't get a lifetime of rises without scars. And you don't get to judge the measure of a man by his worst headline. Judge him by the nights he was awake for his children. Judge him by the quiet donations made in a son's name. Judge him by the way he kept choosing to show up when everything in him wanted to disappear. Legends aren't just formed by applause. They are forged in the silence after the applause stops. If you grew up with that record player and that jacket, you remember the warmth his movies gave you, the music, the moves, the grin. But his legacy now is something older and harder. A living lesson that love asks everything and sometimes takes everything. And a reminder that even after the world has taken its worst, someone can still move forward and keep carrying the light for others. So here's what you do next. Don't let the story die as a short headline. Remember the man who danced through pain, who buried nearly everything he loved, and who still chose family, gave to charity, flew into the quiet sky when the world got loud. If he ever lit a part of your life, sing his songs once more. Tell your neighbor, press like, leave a memory in the comments. Not for celebrity, for the human lesson. How many comebacks can one heart survive before it's no longer about comebacks at all, before it becomes about endurance? John Travolta's answer, as many as it takes. He's still here. He's still breathing. And for that alone, his story deserves a long, painful, grateful look.